Today we're going to be focusing on adding and subtracting mixed numbers. So we're continuing with our fractions topic and combining what we've done so far, which was converting mixed numbers to improper fractions and improper fractions to mixed numbers. And then last week you also looked at adding and subtracting standard fractions, both with the same denominators and also different denominators. So we're going to combine those two skills that we've learned so far with adding and subtracting mixed numbers. So let's look at a first example. So if we have 1 and 3 over 4 plus 1/4, we are going to follow some steps to help us tackle these questions. So our first step is, if you have any mixed numbers, okay, any mixed numbers at all, we're going to convert them to improper fractions. So let's do that first. So we have 1 whole and 3/4. So this means 1 lot of 4. So 1 times 4 is 4. Add on your 3 to give you 7 over 4. Remember that denominator does not change. And our last term is just a normal fraction, so we're going to keep it as it is. So that's us converted any mixed numbers that we have into improper fractions. Next step is to check to make sure our denominators are the same. In this case they are. If they are not the same, then we know we need to change them, because the only way that we can add and subtract fractions is if those denominators are the same. So they are the same, which means we don't need to do anything else there. The third step is we then just go ahead and add and subtract our numerators. So we've got an addition here, so we're going to do 7 add 1 to give us 8 over 4. Okay, so 8 over 4, 7 over 4 add 1 over 4. And our last step is to simplify or change to a mixed number. So 8 over 4, that means how many 4s go into 8? And we have 2, and 2 is our final answer. So can you please make sure, if I haven't already said, to copy all these examples down as we go through in your jotter, just so you've got them to look back and refer back to. Okay, example 2. So this time we've got 1.5 plus 5 over 8. So our first step was to convert any mixed numbers into improper fractions. So we have a mixed number here. This is 1.5, so 1 times 2 is 2, add the 1 is 3 over 2. The last term is just a fraction, so we don't need to do anything with that. So we've got 3 over 2, add 5 over 8. Second step was to check that the denominators are the same. In this case, you can see that they are not the same, so we are going to have to change them, find equivalent fractions so that our denominators are the same. So if you think about the 2 in the 8 times table, we are trying to find the lowest common multiple that is in both the 2 and the 8 times table. So and in this case, it's actually 8. So our last fraction doesn't have to change. We're going to create 2 fractions over 8. This last one is already over 8, so that's fine. We don't need to change that. And then we need to think about, well, how did we change this? How did we change this 2 to become an 8? Well, we times it by 4. And whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So 2 times 4 is 8, which we've got. 3 times 4 is 12. So we've now completed step 2, which is making sure that our denominators are the same. So now we can go ahead with our third step, which is to add or subtract. In this case, we've got an add. So just adding our numerators together, our denominator does not change. So 12 add 5 gives us 17 over 8. And do not forget our last step, which is to change this into a mixed number. So how many 8s go into 17? Well, 17 divided by 8 is 2 with 1 left over. And that 1 that's left over goes as a fraction over 8. And that's your final answer. Okay, so your turn. If you please pause the video here, use the notes that you've written down in the previous examples to help you answer these, and when you unpause, we will go through the answers. Okay, so first step is to always, if you have any mixed numbers, we need to change them to become improper fractions. So first one, we've got 1 and 5 6, add 5 6. So we've got 1 times 6 to give us 6, add on 5 to give us 11 over 6, add 5 over 6. Our second step was to make sure that our denominators are the same, and if they're not, we need to change them. In this case, they are the same, so we can go ahead and add our numerators onto step 3. 11 add 5 gives us 16 over 6. And our very last step was to change our answers. If it's an improper fraction, we need to change that into a mixed number. So 16 divided by 6 is 2 with 4 left over, so 4 over 6. And always make sure that your answer has been fully simplified. So see this last part of our mixed number, the fraction, 4 over 6. We can actually simplify that to divide top and bottom by 2 to get 2 over 3. And that's your final answer. So if you got to this step, well done. But I do want you to really make sure that you're fully simplifying your answer to get to the last step there. Okay, question B. Step 1, any mixed numbers, we need to convert them into improper fractions. So 1 times 4 is 4, add on the 3 to give you 7 over 4. And then we've not got a mixed number there, so I'm going to write that down. Step 2 is to make sure that your denominators are the same. In this case, they are not, so we need to think about our 4 and our 3 times tables. What is the lowest number that is in both? If you struggle to think about that, you can always write out your times tables at the side. So 4, 8, 12, 16 and so on. And your 3 times table, 3, 6, 9, 12. And then you can see that the lowest common multiple is 12. So we're going to create 2 equivalent fractions over 12. And now we need to think about how have we changed this 4 to become a 12? Well, we've times it by 3. And whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So that becomes 21 over 12. How have we changed that 3 to become a 12? Well, we've times it by 4. Whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So our calculation is now 21 over 12, add 4 over 12. And then we can go ahead to our third step, which is adding our numerators to get 25 over 12. And then last step is to change this to a mixed number. So how many 12s go into 25? Well, there are 2 with 1 left over. And make sure that that is over 12. So well done if you got both of them correct. Now let's move on to look at another couple of examples. Okay, so example 3. This time we have a subtraction, but our method is not going to change. We're just going to, once we get to step 3, we're just going to subtract rather than add. So our first step is if you have any mixed numbers, we're going to convert them into improper fractions. So we've only got one mixed number here. So let's change this 2.5 to an improper fraction. So 2 times 2 is 4, add the 1 is 5 over 2. Then subtract 7 over 8. That last fraction is not a mixed number, so we're just going to leave it as it is. Our second step is to check our denominators. So the only way we can add or subtract is if our denominators are the same. In this case, they are not, so let us change them. If you think about your 2 and your 8 times table, you think about what is the smallest number that is in both. And 2 and 8 is in fact in the 2 times table. So we're going to change both of these fractions to have 8 on the bottom. This last fraction has already got 8 on the bottom, so we don't need to change that. But then for this next one, for that 2 to change to an 8, we've had to times it by 4. And whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So 5 times 4 is 20. So that's us converted our denominators to be the same. So then we can go on to our third step, which is now subtract. So 20 subtract 7 is 13 over 8. And then on to our last step is to change this improper fraction into a mixed number. So how many 8's go into 13? So 13 divided by 8 is 1 with 5 left over. So 1 and 5/8 as your final answer. Okay, fourth example. You can see with this question that we have a mixed number in both of the terms. Okay, so that just means we are going to apply step 1 to both of our fractions, our mixed numbers. So we've got first mixed number is 5 times 5, which is 25, and then add on the 2 to get 27 over 5. Subtract 3 times 10, which is 30, add the 3 to give you 33 over 10. Our step 2 is check that the denominators are the same, which they are not, so we need to change that. Think of your 5 and your 10 times table. What is the smallest number that is in both? Well, 10 is actually in the 5 times table, so we're going to change them to both have 10 on the bottom. Our second fraction doesn't need to change because it's already got 10 on the bottom. But then we say, well, how have we changed that 5 to become a 10? Well, we've times it by 2. Whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So 27 multiplied by 2 gives you 54. Okay, and then our third step was to just go ahead, once the denominators are the same, add or subtract your numerators, and then once we've done that, we can convert to a mixed number. So 54 subtract 33 is 21 over 10, and then our last step is to change that to a mixed number. So how many 10s go into 21? Well, there's 2 with 1 left over. Okay, a question for you to try. So your steps: convert any mixed number to an improper fraction, make sure your denominators are the same, go ahead and add or subtract your numerators, and change your answer to a mixed number. Pause now, and once you unpause, we'll go through the answer. Okay, so we have two mixed numbers here. We're going to change both of them to become improper fractions. So first one, 3 times 4 is 12. Add on the 1 is 13 over 4. Second one, 1 times 6 is 6. Add on your 5 is 11. Step 2 was to make sure that our denominators are the same. In this case they are not, so we need to change them. Think of your 4 and your 6 times table. You can write it down if it helps. 4, 6, 12, 16 and so on. 6, 12, 18 and so on. And then we can see that 12 is the lowest common multiple that is in both of the times tables. So we're going to change these fractions to have 12 on the bottom. Now we need to decide what's going to go on our numerator. So our first fraction, we have times that 4 by 3 to get to 12. So whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top to give you 39. We have times this 6 by 2 to get to 12. Whatever we do to the bottom, we're going to do to the top. So 22 over 12 for the last one. And now we can go ahead and subtract. So 39 take away 22 is 17 over 12. And our last step was to change an improper fraction to a mixed number. So how many 12s go into 17? Well, there's just 1 with 5 left over. And that is it, fully simplified. That's your answer. So really well done if you got that. So when you're doing these questions, always think of those 4 steps. You should have those 4 steps copied into your notes. And when you're trying questions, look at those 4 steps and make sure you're following each one. And that is the end of the examples.